right, everyone. Good evening. Still making sure we have everyone. But if I could first ask the panelists, if you guys wouldn't mind, if you do have a recording device next to your laptop, to turn that on so we can put this into a nice podcast and preserve the best bits of this conversation. Who is Judge? Okay, there. We got Judge. And then Sean Clifford, are you here? Are you the mysterious laptop name?
Hello,
Judge. Welcome, man. Good to see you. Good to meet.
Yeah, thank you.
And we are just looking for Sean Clifford. 1 second. Hey, Judge, while we wait for Sean here, maybe we, as a sort of pre-intro, as the idea of this panel was looking at people moving to Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, last week, you guys got hit with that terrible weather, and Texas sort of failed you, it seemed, in many ways, and the power grid failed in many ways, and people didn't have water, and in fact, two of our other panelists had to drop out because their lives were so upended. So maybe you can just tell us what it's like in Austin right now.
Well, it's improved. I actually have to be honest and say I got near, my family got near the worst of it. We were power out for 3 days, no water for 2. When everything got restored temporarily, Austin Energy, our power provider, came in, saw there was a tree on the power lines, snipped the power lines as a fire hazard, and said, "Good luck finding an electrician," and then ran out the door. So we had it out for another 2.5 days again. Not the most, ideal welcome to Texas. So it goes. I have a lot of things, if anyone is curious, to say about the power crisis. I've written a little bit about it before. I will not step away from my statement in general. The Texas power system is pretty good. It's still about half the price of the California system per kilowatt hour. And frankly, it still beats them in terms of blackouts and outages in general. This circumstance, they did not perform up to task, but in general, they're still a pretty decent system, and we're going to find out a lot more about what went wrong probably in the next few months. So we'll see.
Well, good. I'm glad you guys have emerged, and the snow has melted there. And we will get a little bit more into that during the talk here. I think Sean is here, right? SJC. Sean, do we have you? Okay, I'm going to go ahead because I think he's there and he should be joining us. But anyway, so welcome to the final panel of today's conference. For those of you who have not been participating in the other events, this is quite a big virtual undertaking between universities in Rome, the Angelicum, Georgetown in DC, Notre Dame, my alma mater, and Catholic University, Ukrainian Catholic University here in Lviv. These closing sessions of every day are produced by the Lviv Lab for the Activation of Democracy, which was a startup project. I got stuck here in quarantine. I came for this conference a year ago to Ukraine, and I'm still here, and now I'm part of it in a new way. We, with a number of students and journalists, we created the Lviv Lab to push for new ideas in media and to improve how we talk with each other. And we've been working with the university to create these sessions. Last night, we had a bit of an unorthodox saying, a jazz show produced with our friends at Tvoy Misto and live jazz from Lviv. And tonight, we're going to talk about how we can build great cities and societies. Sean, 1 second. Sean is coming on. He's having a little bit of trouble. I'm sorry, I'll pause there. Okay, he'll be there shortly. And we, the genesis for tonight's discussion was a couple articles in the Wall Street Journal I saw over the past few months. One of them was by one of our panelists, by his business partner, Joe Lonsdale. And it was called Why, basically California, Love It and Leave It, and why he was moving his family and his company from San Francisco to Austin, Texas. Many people have done this, including Elon Musk, many big names, and many other people. And so we wanted to explore what what was it that they were fleeing in California, but what are they hoping to build and what are they hoping to find in Austin? And where Lviv comes into this, Lviv is also, it's a great tech city with much promise and potential, with many connections to Austin, Texas. SoftServe, for example, was founded in Lviv and is now co-headquartered in Austin. Austin was the world capital of live music, and so it was a city of great culture, and Lviv likewise. And so we want to explore what are things that people are looking for in cities, and how can we build cities so they don't sort of get dominated and destroyed by whatever industry comes into town, especially tech. And so that's sort of our mandate for discussion tonight. And I'm going to introduce all of our guests, and then Sean will lead us in the conversation. First, we have Judge, who you just heard from, and Judge is director of the, senior policy advisor at the Cicero Institute, which until recently was based in San Francisco in a beautiful spot on the Bay, and now is in Austin, Texas. The mission of the Institute is to find entrepreneurial solutions to public problems, and it is connected with. And Judge, correct me if I get any of these details wrong, but founded by and connected with Joe Lonsdale, a great investor and Silicon Valley entrepreneur, founder of Palantir and other ventures. So looking forward to hearing from Judge Glock. And Judge, thank you for joining us on late notice here very much. And we also have Nataly Veremeeva. She is the CEO, the director of Tech Ukraine, which is a great operation I've become familiar with these past 12 months. They're relatively new. I think they've only been around for a year and a half. But their mission is to tell the story of Ukraine as a vibrant place with a great tech ecosystem, with a talented workforce, and to forge these connections around the world. Natalie really believes in the promise and potential of Ukraine and its people.
Right.
Then we also have my friend Kostyantyn Chyzyk. He is former director of the President's Investment Council under both, he was deputy director under Poroshenko and then briefly director under President Zelensky. He is also former deputy minister of ecology and energy. So he's worked at the high levels of the government here, but he began his career in government as advisor to the Minister of Finance, Natalie Jaresko, who was an American citizen of Ukrainian heritage, who came here to help her homeland in the years after the revolution. And Kostya is currently outside of government and has a lot of experience in telling the story of Ukraine, whether it's at Davos or in Washington, where he's also spent some time on a State Department fellowship. And is also a big believer in the American dream. So I'm looking forward to hearing his perspectives. And we have Dr. Maria Sophia Aguirre. She's an Argentine economist. Currently, she's a professor of economics at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. She's long been a friend and a friend of my family's as well. And she is founder of the Integral Economic Development Program at CUA, which even in its name and in its ethos has many connections to the program that Dean Vladimir has created here, the sponsor of this conference, which is called Integral Human Development in the Digital Age. And Dr. Aguirre is she's advised many governments and the Vatican and the United Nations, and her focus, which of course she will articulate better than I, but is bringing rigorous data and metrics into arguments on how we can build better societies, especially looking at culture and building strong families. And she pretty much strictly deals in numbers and her data-driven research. And then we have, and then I'll stop talking. We have my friend Sean Clifford, originally from the state of New Mexico, and which I'm sure you'll do some advertisement for that fine state during this talk. Sean worked in Washington as a political consultant and strategist for some time, and then he was in Philadelphia studying at the Wharton School and then moved to Austin, Texas. I actually helped while your family flew. It was a long journey across the country, moving your household to Texas. And in Austin, he is the CEO, or the founding CEO of Canopy, which is a company that helps us, and something that I think would have been appreciated in the conversation today from the Angelicum, but helps us use technology smartly. It's a filter for families and anyone who wants to use the internet without sort of letting it harm your soul, but without limiting your access. And Canopy is a company based in Austin and Tel Aviv. And because I had two reasons why I wanted Sean to lead this. One, he's in Austin, and that's three reasons, I guess. He's in Austin, but he's also a very conscientious thinker about community and how to build community and the steps we need to take. But three, I think he's an excellent conversationalist and interlocutor. So with that, Sean, I'll give it to you, and I'll jump into wherever we need to, direct the flow of the conversation.
Fantastic. Well, Joe, thanks very much. And just a little bit of context, Joe was trapped in a car for me for 40 hours. So the fact that he still is willing to put me in a position to speak and have others listen is nothing short of miraculous. So really appreciate you convening this, Joe. And I think it's a fascinating conversation. Look, there's been a lot of migration of people's, especially in the last 20 years, has been increasing steadily, but something changed with COVID. And I have to believe that the shift towards remote work is really going to unlock a lot of different possibilities. And people are now asking with a renewed vigor, where should I live? And what is it that I'm actually seeking in the world? And so to kickstart this, there's a lot of different threads we can pull on here. But the one that I wanted to ask is to kind of paraphrase Churchill. After the bombing of the British Parliament in World War II, there was a question, how should they rebuild it? And so Churchill uttered the great quote, "We shape our buildings. Thereafter, our buildings shape us." And so for the other panelists, the question I would love to pose is, where you are right now, how is the place that you are living shaping people and shaping you? So if we were to think of how New York might shape you or Hollywood might shape you, we each are in communities that leave their own fingerprints on us and point us in not just in a certain direction, whether it's emphasizing what we should love or how we should structure our days or whatever it may be. So with hopes of just kind of kicking off the conversation, I'd love to go to the panel and better understand of your current community where you're currently living. How is that actually shaping the people that pass through?
Which order would you like the answers to be?
Dr. Aguirre, if we could begin with you, that would be great.
Okay, well, I live in Washington, D.C., and needless to say, it has been an interesting month that we have gone through. But if we take a little bit of a more broader than the last 3 months, I think that in Washington, D.C., the pandemic has generated opportunities, not only shortcomings. And one of them is it has forced us all to stop, or gave us the opportunity to stop and reevaluate what are our priorities and the importance of relations. Even the very understanding of work. I have to say, I do want to pick up because I think it's connected to the flight from California. And that is, when the pandemic started, I had an interview and somebody asked me, what do you think is going to do? And I said, I think that it has a lot of great opportunities. One, it will help us be more together as a family and understand relations, perhaps a little bit more, or work out what we need to work out, right? Two, I think that it's going to help us ponder again what is work and the value of work in the context of community and family. And in fact, I can say that if there's one area where I see this taking place, is in this one. I think that we had forgotten to some extent the link between family and work, community and work. And this pandemic has provided the opportunity, even though we have been separated physically, in the household, this has taken place, right? And so dad works and the children see, and the kids are in the computer, and the parents see also the shortcomings and the advantages of this type of education. And the same with the mother. So I think that is a very interesting exercise that we all have gone through. You see it through media. What is the meaning of work, the value of work, and the relational dimension that this work has? And the same goes for work in general, in terms of not only in the household, but with colleagues. So I would say, if I want to point out two things, I would say those are important things, the way it's shaping people and shape us. Right?
Very nice. Konstantin?
First of all, thanks for this great opportunity to actually wear a shirt. Well, that's a good actually change from the sportswear during the pandemics. So to the question on how the buildings are shaping us and what's the current situation here in Kyiv, well, most of the Kyiv was built the way we see it today after the Second World War, when it mostly was destroyed. So the very style was pretty much Soviet. It was brutalism. And it's pure. So the buildings are big, they're gray, they're like huge. And the very idea of them is to show the size of institutions, which were the Soviet institutions at the time, and small size of the person compared to them. Well, in that sort of circumstances, of course, the creativity or innovation are not exactly, well, the things that are first coming in mind. While if you compare them to New York that Sean, you've mentioned, it's pretty much different. And even though a lot of people hate the place, some may say that it's greasy, it's too crowded, there are a lot of things that shape the minds of New Yorkers, in my humble opinion, in a much better and more productive way than it is in Kyiv, for example. While it, of course, depends on the borough that you're in. But if you're in South Manhattan, if you're in the financial district, you could actually follow the very history of the latest of the latest financial system, how it was developed in the world, and you can see that heritage of the American financial imperialism there in the buildings and the details and in the very city planning, which is very geometrical, which is in comparison not the case in Kyiv or in most of the European cities, which are usually, well, much more tangled. So again, comparing to other American cities like, I don't know, LA or San Francisco, the atmosphere is not as welcoming here back in Kyiv. Yet at the same time, it encourages people to develop other qualities, which are probably, well, more required at this particular point here. And these are not exactly the trust qualities that are predominating, I would say, back in the Valley. And I would say that especially during the pandemics, the trust-related qualities are the most important ones. And as Miss Aguirre, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your second.
You guys ordered one of these things for me, and they just sent me a text and said it's here. What's the name? Last name's Lindsley. Yeah, do you need anything else in there?
And as the Miss Aguirre mentioned, also the ties between people, their work, their families, and the community is much better felt in the U.S. And I might be kind of running a little bit ahead of myself to the next parts of the discussion, but quick thing that I want to mention here at this point is that the way the very communities are built in the Valley, as far as I've seen, are pretty much pro individualism and ideas development, which encourage those things in people. And as far as I could judge, this is the best part of the U.S., how it was built. And the very idea of bringing the best people around the globe from different countries, different cultures in one place exactly to create this kind of melting point for different cultures and different ideas, and the courage that the people would bring to develop and then implement those ideas. So I think that this is pretty much the spirit that I could feel in the U.S. Cities compared to Kyiv. I don't know, maybe Natalie or other people from Kyiv would disagree. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, on that, Natalie, would love to go to you, and we'll wrap up with Joe. With Judge, excuse me.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. And yes, I feel like Kostyantyn said a lot of one side of their whole situation. I would like to point out the other one, and I would really like to advocate for Kyiv because I really love the city and I like my time spent here. And I actually see also the other side, and the other side is like nature and the raw energy that we're having here. And here, like when I was visiting Silicon Valley, I was also studying the history, and the history of it was that some time ago it was a hippie place, a place with a lot of opportunities and a lot of really untapped potential that was further structured. And actually this melting point of ideas and of like chaotic energies that were unstructured actually inspired all this creativity and all this events that were happening afterwards, because all these believers and all these hippie people or all these people with great ideas that wanted to explore something new actually came to this new territory, and that ended into this great and wonderful opportunities that Silicon Valley created for the whole world. And actually I have the same feeling a little bit here in Kyiv right now, because we really do have a lot of things that are not structured or not like really put in order, or also some background from the past that we're really like facing and just living also together with. But at the same time, actually, I really liked the thoughts of a Dutchman, like my former husband, that first came to Ukraine, and he said that, wow, there is a lot of wild energy over here. And that actually means the same, like we're in the same very spot right now that maybe Silicon Valley and San Francisco used to be 40, 50 years ago, because indeed we have a lot of things that are not structured, and we have some chaos, but also we have creative energy, like natural energy, and also the creativity of people that actually is waiting for those believers, those great doers, and those visionaries that could help to shape it and to structure it in the right way. So I actually feel a lot of opportunities over here, and I also feel free over here, because I read a lot of information about how things are going in the rest of the world, where we have this, how do you say it, when you can't go out after a certain period of time, curfew, right? Is it like the right word? And then also a lot of things closed. And of course, we also have here certain restrictions, but I think that people are feeling a little bit more free over here. And that also helps to overcome this challenges of the pandemic that the current period is actually posing over the whole world. So, and actually also in this sense, I remember the words of the CEO of Unit City, Dominic Piotr, who moved from Silicon Valley to Ukraine, to Kyiv, to manage this biggest innovation park over here. And he said, "I'm blessed to be in Ukraine in this time." So actually, and I know a lot of foreigners that are really enjoying their times over here, because of course there are business opportunities over here. The Kyiv is very not expensive place to live, but at the same time quite clever people, very clever people, I would say. Like, of course, like not maybe like I can't compare it to other locations, but our people, I really like the potential that they're showing. And so, and apart from that, different cafes and different types of going out that is still available, that actually helps to somehow maintain good living while doing business in Ukraine, in Kyiv in particular.
Great. Well, we will jump now to Judge, and you have to let the audience know from New Jersey to West Virginia to San Francisco to Austin. You've got a few to choose from, and so eager to hear how these have shaped.
I also had some stop-offs in Philadelphia, New York City, Richmond, Virginia, and a few other places, and about a year in Shanghai, China. So I've been all over, mainly in the United States. But, I'll say that San Francisco holds the candle and will keep holding the candle as the most beautiful city in America. And I think anyone who's been there would find it tough to disagree with. The tragedy is it's just... there's a lot of problems with the city, but the fundamental fact is it's no longer affordable for most people. Even for someone like me who was doing fairly well at a think tank, I had to rent a tiny little apartment and cram with my 4-member family in that. We had a lovely neighborhood and a lovely place and a lovely hill in San Francisco. But the basic fact of the matter is someone moving from San Francisco to Austin, Texas, or another part of Texas, gets a 50% boost in salary almost immediately. That is the everything from the cost of housing to the cost of electricity, which is, again, not on in both places all the time, but is significantly lower in Texas, to, of course, things like taxes and things like gasoline and groceries. It's simply not, there's not a lot of reasons for people to sit paying about again, 50% of their salary to live in a place, especially in a pandemic where you don't have a lot of opportunities to go out, most especially in San Francisco, which has been more or less under lockdown nonstop for a year. And yet, you still saw California have pretty close to the middle range in terms of deaths from COVID. So what Austin offered was what San Francisco offered, and what both, I think, Natalie and Kostyantyn were talking about. They admire in a city is a sense of openness and a sense of freedom that Silicon Valley lost. And now what happened in Silicon Valley is that you had, as I often describe, it was kind of like sitting on a gold mine. It had this gold mine of these immense number of very intelligent, very driven people who were able to create great things. But the problem is, if you're sitting on a gold mine, there's something called maybe the government or the landlords or something who can say, hey, look, we can pick off as much of that as we want, and the gold mine's still going to be here. The gold mine's not going anywhere. And so therefore, you could drive the cost of housing up to basically 3 times the level of the rest of the country. As I often said, the average house in San Francisco costs about $1.6 million. The rest of the country, it's about $300,000. This is absolutely insane. And that's because they made it so very, very hard to build there, because they knew some people would still be willing to pay $1.6 million to live next to that gold mine that was Silicon Valley. What you saw during the pandemic, of course, is a lot of things like what we're doing right here. Is a lot of that work opportunity could be taken place online, and you didn't need to be right next to the gold mine that is San Francisco and pay through the nose to be able to do it. You could interact with a lot of people and work with a lot of people online. Now, the important qualification is that I clearly did not choose to move, say, back to West Virginia or to Montana, which would have been significantly cheaper. One of the things I used to tell my students when I was teaching at West Virginia University, cities are basically machines that allow people to interact with each other. Now, there's things like this, we can interact with each other online. One of the big factors in cities is interact with each other to work. There's a lot of things that you can now do online. You don't need to interact with each other to work with. But the other thing you can do in new cities, and their cities are useful for, is to interact with each other for entertainment. You can't just go to a live music show online all the time. It's not the same. You can't just get great Polish or Ukrainian food in Montana. You can get these sort of things in Austin or in San Francisco. So people are still willing to pay a premium to live in these dynamic cities, because mainly that latter part, or the thing we often don't think of cities. People think of cities as a labor market, basically, a way for people to interact and go to their place of work. That's still going to be essential. There's still lots of things that you want to interact with very dynamic people like. But one of the things you want is that sort of that opportunity to interact directly with humans, and frankly, in an amenities or playful way. The music, the drinks, the restaurants, and all the rest of that. And I don't think anyone would deny that Austin probably takes the candle in that, in terms of being one of the most fun and open cities in America in that regard. So, when you take the combination of a low cost of living, a lot of opportunities, still obviously a dynamic work environment, and a lot of opportunities and amenities for people to live, it seems like a pretty straightforward answer in terms of where to go. And on the whole, you've seen this. Over the past decade, California has lost about 1.5 million people And about 500,000 of those people have driven right over to Texas. And for all the reasons I mentioned, it's cheap, it's open, it's fun. And it's a lot of things that California always used to be, but it's lost, unfortunately, some of that shimmer in the past 20, 30 years. So cost of living is going to be very predominant in the future in cities, but the amenities and openness are going to be very essential too. And whatever can facilitate those is going to be essential in determining what's successful. And Austin, as the fastest growing metropolitan region in the country for the past 5 or 6 years, shows how you can do that successfully.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Judge. And Joe, if you can conclude us on this question, we'll jump to the next one.
Great. Going back to that, the Churchill quote, I think, for example, today, quite a busy day, and I was at my desk. I didn't even leave my little Quasimodo-like apartment in the 17th century hotel monastery I've been living in since the pandemic started. And then I stepped outside, and I'm on a hill overlooking one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. And in the same way that, being in nature, it can lift up the soul. But if I went to the extreme edge of the city, sort of in a Soviet bloc, I would have, if I walked out into that, my day would have gotten worse. And all the problems I had would still continue. But just being in a scenic place, the way the architecture could lift me up. But more than that was just something I noticed today. But more than that, and from all my travels around the world, I've been, a nomad for a while until this pandemic started. A place where, and I love this idea that's emerging here, where of connection, like that Judge, that second point you made, not just entertainment, but I think Sophia would explain and appreciate this well. But how neighborliness and how we can connect with each other. Lviv is a city with perhaps a very high per capita concentration of cafes and small little mom and pop owned meeting places. And you see people I used to live in New Orleans and in Philadelphia, where there was a front porch culture. And in Philly, people toss cheesesteaks from porch to porch. And like, it sounds like a caricature, but they really do. And that makes the structure of life richer and better than, say, the American suburb model, or I think than the New York model. So that's what I'm thinking now, and I found, and that's why I found the combination of being in a historic city and a city that's free. I mean, I think this region of Ukraine, Western Ukraine, Galicia, is sort of the Texas of Europe, and it has a very free mentality, and so there's a lot to explore there. But those are my early thoughts.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much. Well, speaking of freedom, which is something that a number of you mentioned, I want to read a little bit of a quote and then weave this into our discussion. Yuval Levin is an American political scientist, public thinker, and had a piece recently which had the following quote: "The ironic truth at the heart of America's social crisis is this: we have become disillusioned and alienated from our institutions, not because they are too demanding, but because they are not demanding enough. We want to be called to acts of devotion, not just affirmed in acts of expression." So how are institutions, what a church or any other type of organization may ask of us, obviously it's very different from what a city asks of us. And yet at the same time, I think that there is something about being bound in a place where you feel connected to a community with obligations and duties to it, which seems to be somewhat absent from the consideration of where people move. The places where those connections are strongest seem to be losing population. And Austin, for example, is a free place where I would venture to say that the majority of the population here now is not from Austin or potentially even Texas. And so one question that I would love to kind of pose to the group is, as people are making these life choices about where they end up, there's questions of economic opportunity, of entertainment, of the natural beauty, but there doesn't seem to be this focus on planting in a community where you will be bound with the obligations. And so curious to know how you think this metric for the decisions we make, where to go, what we want, if that's ultimately something that leads to human flourishing and does seem to be correlated with that, how should that be factored into the equation? So if we can actually start in reverse order this time, Joe, if we could go to you, then Judge, and on the line.
Thanks, Sean, I knew you were going to do that, but I should have been ready. Because when I hear metrics, I look forward to seeing what Sophia has to say on that in particular. But I mean, I haven't thought about sort of the metrics, but more of sort of a emotional or spiritual calculus of where, you can build a good place. And I think it's been, in so many conversations among our group of friends in Austin, for example, there's so many people have gone there and with sort of conscientiously worked to build a community, which is difficult there. I mean, it's, you're always in your car, you got your friend, everyone lives far away. But you guys make a great effort to get the families together for picnics and, go to music. And you're right. We don't necessarily think about those things. It's sort of incidental. You go to a city because of the big opportunity. And maybe this is an opportunity to shift a time we can shift that focus and perspective. And maybe I could be more conscientious about it. I mean, I love being here, but I'm also here because I happen to get stuck here when the borders close. Were not for that, I was traveling around, every few weeks, every few months, going to a new place, which helps me see what places I like and what places I think are good for human flourishing. And maybe I do need to sit down and analyze what makes those conditions. But there is something, and if we can find a way to measure it, is it proximity to like being able to walk down the street and see your neighbors and friends and family? I think that is part of it. Not always, having to drive somewhere where you can have more spontaneous connections. I think being in a walkable place is maybe pretty essential, or in a place with good public transportation where you can run into people. Yeah, I don't know. I think I have more anecdotal stories to tell, but that would be my overview.
I think the question gets to a lot of the sort of the fundamental issues that bedevil America since its founding. Not to get too deep in it, Americans have always been an extremely mobile people. One of the numbers I often cite is that today the average American moves about 11 times in his lifetime, relative to about 3 or 4 for the average European. We're very mobile, and ever since our founding, we've been concerned that this has led to a certain lack of community in America relative to, say, a small manor-based village in Galicia or in, what used to be Ruthenia or wherever that had been there for time out of mind, centuries, if not millennia. But one of the things that Americans always long had a genius for was voluntary associations. Alexis de Tocqueville, coming from a very traditionalist French culture, was amazed. His eyes were literally bugging out when he came to America and said, if any particular problem arose, Americans found an association to combat it. And so one of our geniuses, even with our very mobile culture, is that we are still able to find these voluntary societies. Everything from our churches to, frankly, originally our school districts were largely voluntary. And we continue to have a lot of these mutual aid groups that you see that have sprung up during the pandemic to facilitate more cooperation. I think America, in those Ukraine I would love to hear your opinion on this. There had been a long time goal, of course, in a lot of the more socialist and social democratic societies to force a communitarian identity. And we had this with, the Khrushchevas, the high up, barracks-like houses in much of the Soviet bloc, and we had this in the communal houses they attempt to find. And what we found in reality was that actually separated people. People needed a sense of privacy to feel a sense also that they could gather together again voluntarily, and they wanted that sort of connection. The ultimate irony today with America is that we're both seeing a continual decline in movement. Americans are about half as mobile as they used to be, even though we're still, again, much more mobile than Europeans. But the number of Americans who point to having a very close friend, who point to talking to friends regularly outside of work on a week, continues to go down. The connections with the immediate family go down. So I think there's a way, and America has shown a past where we can have both mobility and voluntary association, the community that those people need so well. The problem is that there's a lot of things working today that actually inhibits community, and we can get into everything from that to simply the difficulties that the government puts in the way to organizing sort of voluntary groups, to the high cost of doing so. But in many ways, you see a sense of community that's often in America that it's still often lacking in those things thought to be much more communitarian. And again, from the ex-Soviet bloc, one of the things we learned is that the one thing that was most devastated during communism was trust. People lost trust in their neighbors, and one of the most is people like Benjamin Friedman from Harvard, of course. Trust is shown to be the #1 cultural trait in explaining economic dynamism. And Soviet things and top-down solutions destroyed that trust. So the important thing that we need to do in America is find out what's inhibiting that trust in those voluntary communities that we used to be so good at, and allow those to flourish again. There's still problems the government and other people are putting in the way of those sort of groups that we want to have. Everything from allowing faith-based groups doing to sort of the flood of money that's flowing into from government into the usual voluntary nonprofits, and therefore turning them basically into bureaucratic conduits instead of the sort of mutual help, mutual aid situations that America once relied on. There's a lot of things we can do that aren't just based on the cities, and America can show that you can still have that mobility along with that voluntary assistance in that community that we want so much.
Thank you, Judge. Natalie.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, I think that in Ukraine, the situation is a little bit complicated because we have several trends. So on the surface, we have this state system, and of course, like we do have these institutions. But my feeling is that they are a little bit bureaucratized, and still we have some heritage from the Soviet past. Maybe some systems are just too much. They are like need to have some reorganization in terms of efficiency. But the paradoxical thing is that we have the layer of the state, and then we have the layer of the people, and some. And I would say that the Ukrainian society has the tendency to anarchy a little bit because some people are feeling independent of the state, and sometimes they are just saying, "Please leave us alone, and we will do our thing." So this is on the one hand. On the other hand, since Maidan and also before, but the tendency after Maidan really became more powerful, is that people tend to organize themselves in some kind of communities, and these communities are not state, and they are not fixed institutions, but rather like these flexible communities of people that are united by some aim and objective. And I see the same thing in tech, for example. Here we also do have a number of different communities that are doing this or that types of things. And we at Tech Ukraine, for example, even took the challenge just to help unite these communities into some bigger meta community. So I would say that it's just difficult to make any fixed statement about what is the relations of Ukrainian society to the institutions, because it's really still being shaped. The old system is reorganized, and I hope that it will be more up to date right now. But I have the feeling that people are still have not so big connection to this institution. So I even have the feeling that state is just running in one layer of in one universe, and then people's lives is just happening in the other one, and they are not that much interconnected. I would say that generally it is nice to have strong institutions that are really efficient, but in some, if you remember, there is like this life cycle of an organization, and at some point they are becoming too bureaucratized. And then it can be like either you need to reform that, or they will be slowly die. And I think that this is the point where we are at right now. So this reorganization is really needed, and at the same time, something new is emerging. So that's my feeling.
John, thank you. I actually think that this is a great question, and I really appreciate the interventions of all the previous speakers. In my humble opinion, I think that the answer to that lies in answering a different question, which is, what is that what we want to build at the end? Because institutions, at the end of the day, is nothing more than the resemblance of the people in those institutions and the people who created those institutions and the people for whom these institutions are operating and working, on one hand. On the other hand, some even American prominent politicians said, like Kennedy, that leadership is not about letting people where they want to go, but this is the art of leading people where they not necessarily want to go, but where they ought to be. So if you want a strong institution that builds up not innovation, not freedom, not trust, but an operating mechanism to implement its own ideas of the government, for example, or of this institution and not of the people, well, you can go to China, you can go to Russia, or you can go to Ukraine 30 years ago. But probably that's not exactly something that we're looking for right now, especially with due to pandemics. And in the US, even though I appreciate greatly a lot of the things in the communities that you've built, I do think that some of the focuses might require rethinking. What I mean is that I would assume that the key focus of building communities and communication and cooperation between communities and institutions and the people were productivity. And it was rarely that the happiness or innovation were among the key criteria there. There were some exceptions, of course, and the good example of this would be the Silicon Valley, which probably would not have been created without the initial governmental support and without the physical conditions that were created there and the people that were brought that were there from the high learning institutions and the capital that followed. So that was the mixture of a strategy and the strategic view of the government, and then these kind of conditions that the institutions and the government provided for the people to organize themselves in order to achieve the strategic aim that was set by the government, which is probably one of the best examples. And even though the initial aim of the government might have been military related at the very beginning or economically related, but at the end of the day, the community that was built there, and which is still hopefully there, is based on innovation and trust and creativity. And this is something that you could rarely find in other places, regardless where you go and regardless how developed the region would be. And this mixture of this creativity, courage to implement those creative ideas, and the capital required to implement and test out the ideas, it's all there. And when rethinking these approaches of institutions of what are they building in the end, even though we should probably move towards happiness or joy more rather than simply productivity, we should not forget that those processes are operating because of the physical conditions that were there and because of the people that are brought to one same place. And if we rethink it in a little bit wrong way, we risk losing the people which are the core of this very environment that will go to Austin or to other places, or even potentially might even leave the US, which has worked so hard throughout the recent decades to lure and attract the most talented and prominent people throughout the globe.
Okay, wow. There's so much already said that I don't know where to begin to, but perhaps I have to say, listening to all your comments, whether it is we want opportunities, but there's also relational dimensions to everything you said. I would say the issue of alienation, the issue of we want more than just good condition for work or productivity. I don't think that you can separate them. from the fact that we are relational. If I might push right now, first concept I think it could be interesting is, what about if we maximize, not as self-utility maximizers, but as relational people? And what does it look like when we think choices of places to live or ways we engage? I was thinking as I was listening to all of you, Austin has become a popular place. So is North Carolina, and so is the west of Washington, D.C. And the reason for that is because people, I would suggest, is they are looking for, when we think about optimization of work, creativity, when we think about opportunities, what is involved is much more than just the conditions, material conditions per se. Those material conditions need more than that, material, but the relational possibilities that come from that material condition. You know, as you might know, I do a lot of work on economic development and sustainability as a consequence of that, both in developed and developing countries. And one condition you see emerging across sciences, and certainly economics is not an exception, is that relational factors are key. And for sustainability, for success, call it voluntary work, or I call it social responsibility. Call it civic responsibility or engagement, call it family life and quality of life. Really, those relationships is what generates the creativity, what makes it possible to be sustainable. And what I find fascinating is that everybody talks at points to it. But then we fail to really identify exactly what those relations are. Right? What you hear is North Carolina is popular because it's a family-friendly state. Austin is popular because it's cheap, right? Well, it's important. We are not angels. We need means, right? But on the top of that, we have this culture and we have these possibilities of engaging. Joe was saying, well, I want to be able to get to people. That speaks more to relationality again. So I think that the premium that we are looking for, and perhaps the comment on the alienation or the problem with alienation, I would say it is precisely that relationality that we are looking for, and we need to begin to think, how do we measure, how do we facilitate it, how do we create those conditions? It will reveal trust, it will create most opportunities, and in fact, people are responding to it. I think that also is interesting on this context. The reference of Kostyantyn of the structures of government or whatever, I would say that if you look at the data or the experience, is that when you try to impose those structures, whether it is in the United States or it is in former communist or today, or is the, media in general, or the networks and social networks and so forth, sooner or later people will revolt, because people are seeking for those relations, even when they are using incorrectly or being let themselves be manipulated by media or social networks. So are inefficient from an economic point of view, are inefficient and unsustainable, and they are alienating, and therefore they fall in themselves. Again and again, what you see across sciences is that it's synergy, which in social terms means relationality, what really makes things thrive. And so when we think about how do we overcome it, right, is through those channels, is identifying what are those, what I call efficient channels of relations that make thrive people in different conditions. Business, countries, communities, I mean, at whatever level you want to talk about. That's my 2 cents. Alienations, yes, it can be, But the alienation comes through, is overcome by relationality, structures of relation, facilitate relationality.
Wonderful. Well, that's a segue. I know we are running out of time, but I would love to do a very quick speed round at the very end with hopes of trying to distill the thing that you actually think would contribute most to more of that relationality or more of that trust. So the question I'll try and pose is this: whether you're operating in an existing environment, an existing city, what is the thing that if you had that magic wand would actually really take it to the next level, to foster more trust or to really enable the community to cohere in a better way? Or, and I know Judge occasionally hangs around with some folks that contemplate a brand new city. If you were to start from scratch, what is that one or two things that you would do to make sure that city points people, whether it's the government, the direction of the streets, the way that the neighborhoods are designed, whatever it is? I want this to be open-ended. But the basic question is this: carte blanche, magic wand, one or two things that would actually move us from alienation towards this relationally rich, denser or social capital that I think people strive for, and how a city actually can move you in that direction. So with that, we'll do quick speed round. Joe, we'll start with you. Judge, Natalie, Constantine, and Dr. Aguirre at the end.
I think in the context of Ukraine, and maybe first, I have two parts to this. One, maybe it's a Jeffersonian answer, the idea we need revolutions. I mean, so much of, I was never here before the revolution of 2014, but I have seen that the spirit of what happened then, when the people took to the public square and demanded their country, despite other political differences, whatever other differences they had, they together demanded, sort of self-determination. And I've met so many people that have participated in those events that has transformed their lives. And I think that that spirit is why I find this place so special. But there's things that led to that, right? And it's family's very important here. They don't have nursing homes. The generations live together. Sure, there are problems with that, but I think it also creates a great cohesiveness. Religion is taken very seriously. When you talked about what the place requires of us, I mean, there's rituals that you have to sort of partake in. There are seasons, but I think so. All those things help create this society where people, instead of tearing each other apart during a moment of great crisis, they took to the streets together. And then now, so does that mean the answer is having a revolution every 10 years? In which case, Ukraine is on that trajectory recently in the past few decades. But I think here's where you got to find some solution to keep that spirit alive. And one thing that the reason why I came here in February was to collaborate with some journalists I'd met. And we do have, I think he's listening in on the call, but there was my friend Taras Yasenko and his wife, after the revolution, came back to Lviv and created a media whose mission was to keep open the public square. The revolution is also often called Euromaidan. Maidan means square. And so really this idea that we do need to have this, not just a public square as an idea or a journal, but a real place where people get together and connect. And so they created media here where people actually come and meet in person to solve their problems, in addition to, online. And so something there is an idea I want to develop, but the idea of the Maidan and the public square, and hopefully in a way you don't have to have a revolution. We got to figure out how to apply this to America, which I don't know.
Hi, yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I mean, one of the things I do like to remind people is in many ways, even though there are real concerns with American alienation and the rest of it, America, as I mentioned, still has a very thriving voluntary and nonprofit world. By many measures, Americans give about 2% of their income to charity. The rest of the world, it's usually less than 1%. We have a 10% of our points of our GDP is actually nonprofits. We have a lot of ways that we organize together to help each other. And we should keep that in mind when we talk about contemporary alienation. Americans have an innate genius, as I think all people do, to organize together voluntarily. We don't have a lever to pull to know what is the better thing to help create more community. But I do know the lever to pull to not do that. And that is exactly to create more of the politics that we saw in the communist bloc. Politics is fundamentally a zero-sum game. What you take from A is what you take, is what you give to A is what you take from B. By contrast, voluntary association, commerce, and all the rest of it is a fundamentally nature about finding out what other people need. What do you go when you go into a store? How can I serve you? How can I help you? Finding out, this is what Adam Smith pointed out in the theory of moral sentiments. The thrill and the urge to act with each other, to open up that space for interacting with each other, is essential to creating that sort of free voluntary community, not a forced top-down community, because it makes you have to constantly think, how can I help someone else before they're going to help me, as opposed to thinking, how can I take something else from someone else? And what you have to remember is America was able to create that sort of community. And over the past 30, 40 years, you see more and more things that, well, if we just sort of mandated the exact sort of welfare system we have, and we just had one national system for social services or foster care, what is it? Then we can solve all these problems with evidence-based solutions or whatever it is. But what we've actually found in practice is each one of those things nips away at the sort of efflorescence of common human interaction that's so essential to our society. And gradually we see that alienation as things that we get provided from society, as things that we can provide with each other. And so anything that can sort of limit that interaction of the state with the rest of especially non-pop society, in a way America has been very successful in the past, I think is the right way forward to create that sort of community that we also desperately need.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Judge. And again, quick time check. Apologies that we have run a little bit over, but Natalie, Constantine, and Dr. Gray would love to hear very briefly if you have.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity again. And so I would answer two questions. So first, what would it change in the city that I'm living right now, and that is Kyiv? I think that here the city requires better organized processes. So just to have a little bit more structure. And this is, in my opinion, will bring it good, because the emotional part is there, and I think that people are really well connected and just really communicate with each other. If I would be organizing in your city, I think that two things are really important to be put in place, and they need to be in balance. And first, like generally we have energy and we have information, so we have structures and emotions. So we need to find the right balance between like having good, efficient structures and having people that are connected to each other, that are willing to live with each other, that are having trust in each other, and some emotional connections, and maybe some bigger objectives, so that people are really gathering in groups and start to cooperate when they have some bigger perspective. And I think this is very important to have when you are deciding to live together for, in some specific area for a certain period of time. So I think finding this right balance is the challenge that almost all the cities are struggling with. And so the new cities, I think they will have the same challenge, but evidently this golden middle should be giving us the satisfaction that we're all searching for.
I fully agree with what Natalie's just said, and my 2 cents in that would be the things that Ukraine and Kyiv are lacking are probably the things that most of the U.S. cities and communities already have, and vice versa. So speaking of Kyiv, I would, on top of the structure that Natalie voiced out, add equal opportunities. So overall fairness. This is what I would add to working institutions, better judiciary system, and better law enforcement, and at the same time, better carrot. So if we would have a working stick, we should give the carrot to the people as well. And that should be economic opportunities. And that refers not only to the city development, but to community developments. While if we take the U.S. Places and cities, I would add some soul. I've seen some recent interesting studies that the very U.S. cities were built around mobility and cars to stimulate car production and industry and roads production and consumptions of fuel. While there's this dispersing people at such a huge territory not necessarily leads to people talking to each other and communicating in the best way. So I would maybe add some flavor to this mixture and let people talk to each other more in a more close societies, like just bringing them physically closer together. and bringing a little bit more nature to this mix as far as U.S. cities are concerned. And on top of that, I would also bring a new narrative of inner happiness and awareness but on top of productivity and efficiency. So this is something probably the U.S. towns and cities are lacking. And of course, one thing to kind of unite all the previous issues might be public art and interactive public art, to make sure people are using the squares and forums, the jaw and others are mentioned, that there is something new going on there. So if you build the new public art objects that would initiate those new public dialogues and interactions.
Okay, just I would point out two things. I would say if I were to start from scratch, I will take a bottom-up approach. In other words, I will foster proactive participation, whether it is work, whether it is fun, whether it is because we are a unity. After all, it's a story over the day. It's the same person doing different things. So I would say, and this is interpersonal. We are always with people or affected by, influencing by, and influencing other people. So I would say A, bottom up, in a way that generates proactive participation, and two, as whether it is developing a city based on a need. I'm just looking here at a chat and I see somebody writing, well, sometimes cities grow spontaneously around a port, which is not something it is easy to create, it says in the chat. I would say, well, we have needs. I'm an economist, maybe I'm biased, but we need to meet our needs. We need to eat every day. And it's how we put the food on the table, I think, is what we need to rethink. That is, technical efficiency necessarily requires relational dimensions. And so otherwise it's not efficient, it's not lasting. And so I would say, too, when we think about technical efficient, let's move that efficient point to a point that includes interpersonal relations. Those are my 2 senses. If I am to create a new city from scratch.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so very much. I know we have run a little bit over time, and so must regrettably part our ways, but this was enlightening for me. I so welcomed having the opportunity to obtain perspectives from such distinct places, both in terms of where you guys actually call home, but the backgrounds that have shaped your understanding of community, what people are fleeing from, and what they're actually looking for. So, Joe, thanks so much for bringing us all together today. Very much appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Sean, for hosting us. And we're going to post a summary of all these ideas. I'll share with you guys tomorrow, and that way we can keep these ideas growing. And so I think this is a great foundation here. So thank you all. Do pobachenka. Good night. Good afternoon. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you all. Thank you. Nice meeting you all. Bye-bye.
Yes, it was a pleasure.